Welcome to another episode of the AI Time Journal podcast. Each week, we explore how AI impacts us both personally and professionally. For those of you whom I've not met, my name's Melissa Drew, and I'll be your host for this week's episode. This week, we have with us Ema Roloff. Ema is from a company, Naviant, who is a value-added reseller. And through the discussion today, our focus is around as we continue to talk and explore how AI is impacting us, where is the role of the value-added reseller? Where does that individual and also the company, where do they play in that whole journey as we continue to transition to AI technologies? Ema, welcome.
Thank you for having me. I appreciate it. Great to be here.
We always love good stories. And one of the stories I think would be most interesting is earlier in your career, you started out in secondary education and was a teacher at one point. And I'd love to understand your journey.
Yeah, so I probably have a slightly different background, which I'm always excited to talk about this because I think teaching is such a great way to kind of take some of those skill sets and apply them to a different
Mm,
industry is one of my favorite things to talk to people about. So you hit it on the head. Growing up my whole life, I had family members that were teachers. Obviously, everybody's interacting with teachers and has their favorites. And so just throughout my life, that was always going to be the career that I was in. And the age range shifted and the subject matter shifted over the years as my favorite subject changed. But ultimately, I always wanted to be a teacher. And I still really enjoyed being in the classroom all through my student teaching and my formal education in that space. But by the time that I got to graduation, I was actually given an opportunity to kind of see how I could take those skills and move them into corporate training before I ever had the opportunity to move into my own classroom beyond my student teaching. And that first role outside of college, I worked in a training department helping train franchisees for a food restaurant chain. And so it was everything from how do you make every item of food that goes from the kitchen out to the consumer to what do HR practices look like? What do you need to be aware of while you're hiring? How do you do supply chain and everything in between? And so it was this really great way for me to learn more about business and then also still use those teaching skills by teaching these franchisees. And we had a classroom where I also got to teach. But part of my job in that role also was being the liaison that helped each one of those franchisees recognize the benefit of purchasing this type of franchise. And so while my mindset wasn't there, I was doing sales in a certain capacity. And a lot of the skills that I was learning and honing from that experience not only taught me about how to run a business, but how, what are the things that people care about, or what are the areas of opportunity that these different businesses have to improve their operations. And after a couple of years, because I had been in the restaurant business for such a long time and with the same group of franchise community, since I was 15, I needed something a little different by the time I was approaching 25. There's not many people that have had the same job for 10 years at that point. And so I started looking around for new positions, and my husband had just finished doing a project with my current company, Naviant. And he admittedly said, I don't know much of what they do. I know they're involved in technology, and you said you kind of want to get into that. And but everybody there is great. I liked the culture. Everyone I worked with was wonderful. And so I don't want to say blindly, because I did poke around the website and I did look at like who they were, but I applied for a job that I met one of the requirements for. And that was that I had a 4-year degree. And so I was very shocked and surprised when I got a call back for an interview and then a subsequent interview in person. And when I was there for one of my first interviews, I was talking to our since retired COO and our current CEO during that interview. And Liz, our COO at the time, had said, I used to work for IBM. And one of the things that IBM used to do before technology was a thing was they would go to college campuses and they'd recruit teachers. because they needed people who were outgoing, who could explain things, who were able to have those, those interpersonal skills that make you successful at sales. And that's how they went about it. And she told me, if you're willing to take the time to learn the technology and like learn, the steps of what a sales process looks like, we'll teach you those, because you have the skill set that we need for somebody to be really great at this. Because the stuff that we do is not people's, day-to-day skill set. And we're going to need somebody that can help them understand what these tools will do for them and what a transformation will look like. I throw that word in there now. I don't know if 7 years ago we were using the word digital transformation all that much, but the concept still remains the same. And so that was really my first segue into realizing that maybe my whole life I was pushed towards teaching because of these skills that I had. And, being outgoing, always wanting to talk, wanting to explain things and help solve problems. As a little girl, a teaching position is a really good position to drive someone with those skills towards. But maybe if I hadn't been a little girl who, self-identified as being the teacher and the mom every time we played a game, maybe I would have been driven towards sales just based off of some of my personality traits and my skill sets early on. And so that's one thing that I love to talk to people about is if you're a teacher and you're looking for something that's a little different, this is a really great segue into all sorts of different careers, whether it's a project manager or all of these different things where you're talking, managing processes, managing people, all of those things. They're really applicable skills that I've been able to reutilize.
I think that some of the skill sets you bring are patience, that maybe typical consulting 101 doesn't teach you. So not only patience, but you're coming at it from an educational perspective, which is more in line with the conversation, not so much necessarily a sales pitch. No, and full transparency, I do work at IBM, but none of this was rehearsed prior. So I just want to throw that out there, but I can see the connection. I don't think I would have until you made the dots, until you connected the dots. But yeah, as a teacher, you're thinking about very quickly how to respond to another individual and re-communicate in a way that they're going to understand that. And that, you're right, there are so many things that you've illustrated and probably haven't even touched on that a teacher could absolutely make a really good consultant, or in sales or in project management, anywhere where there's a client facing role. Yeah.
One of the things that and this is a small nuance, but probably one of the best skills I learned being a teacher is recognizing that it's okay to say, I don't know the answer to that question, but let's figure it out together. And I can promise you a room full of 7th graders staring at you, waiting for you to answer a question is 5 times more intimidating than any adult or group of adults asking you a question that you don't know the answer to. And so I would say that just that natural drive to kind of figure things out and try to solve problems is probably one of the biggest kind of secret skills that comes along with being a teacher that's really greatly impacted the way that I do my job today.
I like that. So let's shift fast forward. You've been with your company now 7 years. I want to just pivot slightly, because the company you work with is really what we'd call in the industry a value-added reseller. And I know nowadays the word value seems to be taken off and everybody just calls it a reseller, but no, it truly is a value-added reseller. And I'd like to start with your explanation of what that is. What is a VAR? Yeah.
And you're right. It is interesting. And before we kind of started talking about the topic of this, I didn't really make the connection in my mind that we've kind of stopped talking about that value part of it. But yeah, 7 years ago when I started, the term VAR was pretty frequently used. And really what it is that Naviant as an organization isn't the developer of the software platforms that we implement for our customers. What we are is a process consulting company at our heart. And then that gives us the flexibility to partner with a couple of really wonderful software platforms. and resell their tools and implement their tools to help solve those process challenges that we're identifying through our consulting practice. And where I would say from our perspective, that value, like that additional value really comes from is that we are solely focused on, and our survival as an organization is solely focused on the happiness of our customers. And so we go that extra mile to make sure that we're solving those problems, that we are working with our customers through the challenges that they've got, because our focus isn't on developing the platform. Our focus isn't fixing bugs that come into the software solution. Hopefully we're helping you along the way get those things announced and pushed through and fixed from our software partners. But our focus is our customers' process, how they're using the tools, and what their experience with that tool is. And our survival as a company means keeping our customers happy, keeping them our customers, which is certainly the case with the software platforms themselves, but to a different degree, because that is our focus, is implementing and supporting those solutions rather than building the tool itself as well. And then because, and I think we might get into this a little bit more too, but because we're not developing the platform itself, we also have the freedom to have a couple of different relationships that allow us to really look at process and requirements that are coming from our customers to help pick the right tool to enable their process. So we certainly go into our process consulting engagements looking for opportunities to help improve process and potentially implement our tools. But we don't always, going into one of these conversations, know exactly what we're going to implement from our toolkit. Because we have this blend and this overlap of tools, we can say, okay, based off of what you just told me and what we know about these tools, we'd suggest we go down this path and we look at this software platform and implementing it this way with these components. And we have a bit more flexibility to integrate tools and kind of build this cohesive end-to-end solution in a different way than we would if we were the developer of the software ourselves.
So what I found important about this conversation is we constantly talk about AI technologies, how AI is impacting the organizations. We focused on, the data organization, the analytics organization, data literacy, data culture. I mean, there's this, huge umbrella when we talk about AI, but we haven't really discussed yet what the role of that value-added reseller is and where do they play in this larger picture. And in talking to you and looking a little bit more at the space, you guys have a solution, robotic process automation, specifically for call centers, accounts payable, human resources, claims processing. So when you build those relationships, are these folks that develop these softwares, come to you? Like, how does that relationship evolve? And then we'll just take it from there.
Yeah. So, I mean, you mentioned we've got like the RPA partnership. We also have a partnership with a software vendor that it falls under the category of content services. So for people that aren't aware of that, those are pretty industry agnostic process management tools and content. So things like videos, images, documents, whether it's scanned or PDF, all of the different types of content and information that we're working with and driving processes. So like in that scenario, we've had a partnership with Highland Software for over 20 years. That one was actually born and bred back 20 years ago because we were implementing other tools and that tool was no longer going to be supported. And so they started looking for, at the time, 20 years ago, another tool that could help our customers with strictly document management and electronic management of information from that standpoint. And then that partnership with Highland Software has grown and really blossomed over the last 20 years. And we're now their top reseller in the world. So from that standpoint, that one kind of came, we went out and we seeked out that relationship and we have fostered it over 20 years. Now you mentioned that other partnership with RPA. Highland has some RPA tools. We also have a standalone partnership with Cryon software, from an RPA perspective, that one again was our team going out and proactively looking at the different platforms that were available, and kind of having partnership conversations with a couple of those different RPA platforms. Now,
Mm-hmm.
Cryon is in that top quadrant for RPA, but they're not the biggest partner. And part of that was because we wanted some of their capabilities that they had that were differentiated, but also looking at what are the types of companies that we can partner with that we see cultural similarities with, so that we can be effective and use our partnership in the same way that we've been able to be successful with Highland Software. Our third one came from an acquisition. We had an acquisition of another company very comparable to Naviant, and they were using Abby software extensively. And then we recognized, hey, this could be, they've got some really wonderful tools that our customers could benefit from. And then the third side is there's always more and more tools being created and opportunities for us to partner. Sometimes there are people that will reach out to Naviant to, have partnership conversations. And then sometimes we run into solutions and we build solutions out with our customers and recognize, hey, there's something here that we should be paying attention to and helping other companies implement, and kind of building out partnerships based off of what we're seeing work for our customers.
So if I'm a company and I've been working on this AI technology for about 4 years, I finally got it ready to go, bring to production. Why would me as a company choose to work with a value-added reseller? Like, why would I do that? Again, going back to the role of where's the value in the value-added reseller? Yeah.
So I would say number one, and probably the most simplistic reason, is when you partner with somebody who has experience in the industry, they're going to make you better by kind of pushing, especially for startups. They're going to ask questions, they're going to push you, they're going to help you figure out how to be effective, where to niche your solution in.
Okay.
And then I guess maybe this is the most obvious, but you get a built-in sales force that's going to market with your tool. And you have that many more opportunities to be a part of a conversation and look for sales opportunities and then experience in the market. So I would say those are probably the two biggest components. Is like, if you're working through a partner network, you're really giving yourself the ability to just get more at bats and that kind of gained experience from those experienced value-added resellers then.
I think I'm starting to see again, connecting the dots. There are more startups now than ever. I know that Dr. Eloise Epstein has a spider chart that's out there on LinkedIn, really focusing on where these startups and the spider chart just keeps getting larger and larger and larger. And then if you apply, if you overlay which those companies have these AI technologies, it even gets broader and broader. And they're all competing with each other, and they're all trying to find that space in that market. And I think what I'm hearing is if I had a startup and I wanted to get out to the market pretty quickly and gain some of that market share, you're right. As a startup, I'm trying to build everything from scratch. I'm trying to build my sales force from scratch. I'm trying to build, collateral, the messaging, and really, what I'm hearing from you is, as a value-added reseller, someone who's been out there and you've done this, and you've also got these, solutions, you're able to. And I think you mentioned this exactly. You're able to help facilitate their conversation, help them think about things that maybe they hadn't thought about yet because they were so focused on the technology around the sales, the marketing, and the messaging to the external customer. Is that I'm hearing that correctly?
I think that's a huge part of the benefit for a startup. And again, if you're able to even just, at a base level as a startup, being able to network at a level where you can hear kind of, and I would hope somebody that's building out a solution has an idea of where they anticipate the need being in the market. But to your point, there are so many solutions. And every time I go to a trade show and you're walking on the trade show floor, everybody's got AI, everybody's got machine learning, everybody, and that's including us, and when somebody, if I were in the buyer's situation and I'm walking around trying to figure out what solution to invest in and where to go with my dollars, I wouldn't know where to start because everybody's using the same buzzwords. Now, if you can find somebody that already has has established relationships and has a stronghold in a specific industry or solving a specific problem for a business, you get that leg up of figuring out where are you going to help solve problems. Now, at a base level, again, I would hope as an organization and you're building out that collateral, you have an idea of what problems you're solving so you can get beyond that AI machine learning, like buzzword centric market proposition. But there is inherent value in being able to have a partner that is specifically focused in an industry. So, I mentioned, Highland Software is not a young company. They've been around, they have an established record, but part of why they have been so successful is they have this really strong partner network with partners that focus in specific industries and know and live and breathe in those industries. So, we have a team that focuses on government and tribal nation implementations. We know from our experience what it takes to be successful in helping those, whether it's a local government or that, kind of self-contained tribal government move through a transformation. We're using Highland Software's tools, but we're the ones with that industry experience. Or I work on our enterprise team where we're helping large commercial companies and insurance companies go through transformation. Our consultants were born and bred in the insurance industry. So we have expertise there that, yes, Highland has folks that know insurance, but they don't have the exact same experience that we do. So we are able to execute and implement these solutions with a different focus because of our expertise in those industries. And so I think if you can partner with the right companies, it can unlock a whole different type of problem that you're solving because you're going to be able to tap into that knowledge and their expertise there.
I'd like to elaborate a little bit more on that. I think there's a myth that if I'm working with a reseller, basically I have no connectivity back to the company that owns the product, that you guys have resold the technology to me, that you are the ones who are implementing, I'm working with you on a day-to-day basis. But I think what I just heard is that it's really more the value-added reseller is really more of a partnership with the individual or the company that's created the product, and that just because you're that middle person doesn't mean that we've completely left the company that's built the product and set them aside and we never talk to them again.
Yeah. So I'm obviously speaking from my experience specifically at Naviant, so I can't say that this is the truth with every single value-added reseller, but our hope is that our customers feel like they are not only Naviant customers and recognize the value that we're bringing, but by proxy are also, we'll use Highland as the example, Highland customers. And we work to make sure that they have access and know that their voice is heard with Highland Software as well. So we will do things like executive briefings with not only our executive team, but Highland Software's executive team to make sure that our customers can have that direct line of communication back with them. The benefit of working with us is that we can advocate on behalf of our customers, and we can do things like, push a little differently if we need functionality developed in the tool for our customers. We have more than just being a customer. We have a book of customers, and we can speak to the experience of all of our customers and kind of help push in that way. But we also want them to have that direct communication and that direct line of connection back to our partners as well. And so we really do a lot to foster that kind of three-way relationship with our customers and our partners. And when we do things like our own, Naviant conferences, we have people from our different partners come and give presentations and be there for our networking events and those types of things, again, just to further foster those relationships. So I certainly, they're not as close to our customers as they would be if they sold those opportunities directly or were implementing those tools directly. But they still by proxy understand what they're doing, what problems they're solving, how they're using the tool. And ultimately they are a Highland partner or a Highland customer as well,
Right.
or a Cryon or Abby customer.
I'd like to stay focused on the startups because I think that's a huge niche for a startup that maybe they haven't thought about yet. But I also recognize that we want to see the full picture. We want to see both sides of the story. So if I'm a startup and I think this is the right model for me, what are some of the risks that could also be out there? Because so far we've really highlighted the rewards and the really cool stuff, but I want to make sure that we're showing the whole picture.
I think, if you were to look at risks, you do lose some of the control of your sales cycle and implementation. So you are not the one that's actually doing the implementation unless your relationship is that they, strictly sell on your behalf, which then I don't know how much value that entity is doing for you. So that there is that level of, ultimately the relationship goes back to that bar. So I think that they're, depending on how much you want to control that process and control those implementations, you are inherently separating yourself a little bit from it. And you do run the risk of maybe, you have to properly vet those partners and make sure that you feel comfortable with them representing you in the marketplace, implementing your solutions. Anybody that's familiar with any sort of technology implementation knows that there is plenty of opportunity for missteps or challenges and those types of things. And, from a partnership standpoint, you would hope that they show up, they advocate, and you manage it as a team together if you run into a challenge. But that's any interpersonal relationship. If you don't, know the person and trust the person you're working with enough, you could run into a situation where, someone doesn't show up if there's a problem, or won't advocate for the customer in that scenario, or, blame something on you and your platform from that standpoint. But again, if you're working with, people that you have built relationships with and established that, I think you would hopefully be able to trust them to operate on your behalf and do that in a way that represents the way you want your business going to market. But I would say that's probably the biggest drawback, is you don't have as much control over that. And there is probably more variability in terms of where those bumps in the road may come, the more parties are involved.
I mentioned earlier that there are a lot of companies out there developing brand new products that have, AI technologies, and oftentimes I've been talking to a lot of these CEOs where they've been behind the scenes, kind of off the market for 2-3 years, perfecting it, testing it, piloting it with, a couple smaller companies to make sure that it works properly before it's then completely released, in production mode, but out to the market, into the public for sale. If I think about that time frame, where in that time frame and that journey of building that product and before coming to the market, when is the best time for me as a startup to reach out and start looking at value-added resellers? When would you like to have? I mean, let's look at that from two different ways. One, when would be the right time in my journey? And then two, when would you prefer?
Yeah, I think that's a really good question. It might be difficult to get resellers to really take you seriously if you haven't put the product in and kind of started showing what you're capable of. It would be difficult, I think, to kind of get that unless you had some sort of other relationship built that gives you the opportunity to have those conversations before you're out past those couple of pilots. I feel like you do need a little bit of experience behind you and a couple of stories to tell for people to feel comfortable moving forward with that type of partnership. Again, just knowing that, they're from a reseller perspective, they're going to be putting their reputation and their sales efforts out there on your behalf. They're probably going to want something behind it to show that you can in fact deliver on those promises. So I would say it would probably have to be after you've kind of come out of stealth mode, so to speak, before you start looking for those partnerships. But I don't think you have to you don't have to have 50 customers before you do that, but you need to have something that kind of shows what you've been able to accomplish and have a couple of stories to tell so that they can evaluate if you're the right fit for them from that reseller perspective. On the reseller side, that's probably kind of, again, I don't think we would make a move to bring on another tool unless we knew that they had some success and had some stories to tell and understood where it fit into the marketplace. So I would say it's probably not far off of that kind of coming out of stealth mode, but maybe after you've got 1 or 2 customers under your belt, that's probably when it's a good time to start looking for some of those partnerships or people to at least start the conversation with. And maybe the partnership, if you're a startup, takes a little while longer to build. Versus a more established software company. Microsoft isn't hurting finding new partners to go sell for them. So you're not going to have that experience as a startup, but so your conversations and that cycle of bringing them on as a partner might take longer. But I think after you have a couple of customers under your belt is probably the right time to start looking.
So it's not necessarily the time frame. It's really, I've sold a couple, I've had some successes, I have a couple good case studies to prove it out. And then that's when I can go reach out and talk to VARs. You mentioned just a moment ago, finding the right value-added reseller. I want to take that one step further. How do I know, again, coming back to the scenario that we've been following through, I'm an AI startup. How do I know who's the right partner? Because I think, that's another myth is, well, a value-added reseller is a value-added reseller is a value-added reseller. But you hinted that not every value-added reseller is going to be the right partner. What did you mean by that?
I think that there, in any partnership in general, whether that's a customer and the reseller itself, or there's a culture to a company, and you need to make sure that those company cultures don't clash. I think is probably the biggest thing. And again, going back to some of like minimizing some of those risks in terms of, are they going to go to market in a way that feels natural and good to like how I want to go to market, and are they going to work to solve problems with the customer the same way that I would. And, I think that's what I mean when I say the right partner, is that there is this cultural alignment that makes sense for you to go to market together. And I think in terms of how do you establish that and how do you figure that out, I think that's a very individual thing. And probably industry also, like if you are an AI company and an ML company that's focused on insurance, you probably want to look for resellers that have an established footprint in that area and that have experience there, versus trying to pray and hope that your tool also transitions over to this industry because these people want to talk to you. So I think part of it is going to be like industry alignment, but then also culture of the company. And then even some silly things that might seem simple on the surface, but like it can be difficult to have a reseller relationship with someone that's in a different country than you. So maybe that's not the first one that you go after, because time zones are different and languages might be different. And if you're a small startup and they're, a smaller reseller, maybe there's like issues with even getting connected and being able to stay on the same page if you're half a world away from one another. So I think that it's like small things like that, but very similar to kind of how you would choose almost a vendor from our perspective. Like we're choosing that vendor the same way our customers are choosing us as a vendor or a partner. It's kind of those same type of things that you look for when you're making a purchasing decision from that standpoint, I would say.
Another myth that's popped up a lot recently is I'm this AI startup. I've got this AI technology. Some cases I've been told that it's patented, AI technology or patent pending. Um, so there's a couple other myths I wanted to talk with you. One is if I have a patent pending or an AI patented software, I shouldn't be using a reseller. True or false?
I think that's false.
Why?
Well, we have partners that have patented technology that we
Okay.
resell.
So there still
So
is that relationship where, because you don't know if it's patented, you guys probably don't know the details of the patent. I mean, right?
no,
Yeah.
no, but we can still, I mean, especially now that we've reached the point with a lot of like low code or configurable tools.
Hmm.
Um, Again, through our relationship, if somebody's got specific questions about what's happening behind the scenes, we can make those introductions and get those conversations started with the software developers themselves and what
Hmm.
they're willing to share about that patented technology.
Right.
We're certainly, again, not getting access to the code behind
Hmm.
the actual patent, but we're able to implement the tool because of that kind of low code configuration component that comes along with it.
Hmm.
So I would say that that's, even if you've got a patented tool, you can still have somebody help you go to market with it if it's not, that you're
Hmm.
actually going to source code to implement it is probably the best way of putting that. But yeah,
Yeah.
we do have some partners that have some stuff that we don't necessarily get to go under the hood with, but we can still implement.
So another myth, very similar to this first one, is, oh, I've developed an AI technology, and AI is still fairly new, and therefore, working with a reseller isn't going to know how to work with our technology because it's AI. True or false?
I would say false again.
False.
More from the standpoint of, again,
Yeah.
like that's part of your vetting process, is making sure that the partners that you're bringing on have the right skill sets to be able to support your tool.
Hmm.
And that's one piece that we haven't talked about too. I think another part of being successful with a partner enablement program is having opportunities for your partners to learn how to be successful with your tool. And it doesn't have to be as well established, again, as like a large organization would have, but you do need to have documentation and training materials and things that enable that partner to implement on your behalf. And if you don't, then you're going to end up in the scenario where you're doing the implementation and that they're selling. And again, other than the additional sales force, what's the value that's being added there? So I would say that you certainly want to find a partner that is capable of implementing your tool and helping give them the training and the
Hmm.
onboarding process as a partner that gets them there.
So the last myth question is, I'm the startup. I've got my really cool AI technology, and in order for me to work with a value-added reseller, the company, have to have all the collateral, all the training documentation, and everything completed and packaged before I can even work with a reseller. True or false?
That one's a little tricky
Mm-hmm.
because I would say we do have, some partnerships beyond those ones that I mentioned that are not as well established organizations that are more kind of in that startup zone. But it does, without those components, it does make it more difficult for a reseller to operate on your behalf and operate independently. That doesn't mean you can't get there. That doesn't mean that you can't, again, find a partner that's willing to work through that process with you.
Okay.
It's just probably not going to be as seamless of a process for them to onboard and get comfortable with your tool if you don't have some of those things established.
Okay.
Again, going to market, part of the value is that your partner hopefully would help you figure out some of those things and help create collateral. Woo,
Mm-hmm.
struggled there. But would help you get some of those things out to market and come up with creative ways to open doors. But especially on the training side, I'd say that's where it's going to get a little trickier for you. If you're not able to enable those partners, they're not going to be able to support the solution the same way that they might be able to if you had those tools available.
So it would be a good idea if I had 60% of it done, but maybe the reseller that I'm working with, that partnership can help vet some of that out, help refine it, because you're going to have to learn the software. You're going to have to learn all of the stuff that I have as part of the startup. And you could use, it sounds like what you're saying is you got to have at least some of it there. You can't just go to a reseller with nothing. But given the partnership or the reseller partnership that you develop, there's opportunities where the reseller can add value. There goes, see, we're adding that value, add back into the value-added reseller conversation, where you can add value by helping to refine some of that documentation, maybe make it clearer, provide a little bit more details. Okay.
I would say the one challenge is that it can be difficult for a reseller to put forward a lot of resources to learn a platform in that kind of high touch environment before you have a customer ready to go. And so I would say it has to be the right partner that's invested in you and your platform, probably at a different level than they would be maybe, again, going and looking to go to market with established partners. So you can, again, kind of going back to finding that right fit, you have to find probably a partner that is willing to put forward that investment and willing to partner in that capacity. And that's going to be a part of your vetting process is finding that right partner that can help you through that and help work through that process with you. And that might just change who you're targeting and who you're having conversations with a little differently if you don't have that as well established.
Resume. So Emma, as we wrap up, would you take a minute to provide some lessons learned, maybe wrap up the conversation for us? Key points? Yeah.
To me, a value-added reseller, and again, I'm saying this with my viewpoint and my view on the market, but I think especially as customer expectations are changing, value-added resellers are going to become even more important because our focus is on customer experience and making sure that our customer solutions are humming along rather than strictly focusing on the development of a platform or splitting our focus on customer satisfaction and the development of a platform. So I think for companies that are looking to go to market, it should certainly be a part of your thought process on what types of companies could you potentially be partnering with and where do you have opportunity to kind of expand your footprint through these partnerships. And keeping in mind that not every company is going to be the perfect partner for you, and really taking the time to be choosy on who you do go to market with and making sure that there's like a good cultural and skill set alignment from that standpoint.
Perfect way to end. Thank you so much for your time today, Emma.
Yeah, thank you for having me.